this morning at synagogue sent a bulletin on it. Oh, I gotta go. So what happened to him?
I am.
I'm Julia.
Hi, Julia.
Yes. To let you know if you do say my last name, it's pronounced Marvin.
Okay. I was just going to do your first name. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
I'm going to go out there and wait for Keith and Terry, but I just wanted to come get you before it was too late. It's okay. It's okay. We'll deal with it. You don't worry. I'm going to go stand out and wait for them, and then you can visit with your friends, and we'll do something together when you get
Chris Herbert. I'm sorry for your loss. Long, long time. I know. I was always impressed with how you did it. I always was impressed with your running. You finished. Did you? Finishing it. Absolutely. But I'm sorry. No. Time moves on, right?
I'm Frenna Becky and just remember to do Seder's with you. I'm so sorry to hear about that. Well loved.
Hi, my name is Penny Mulder. I'm Frenna Becky. I am.
Where are you? Who are you going to sit with? Because the rabbi wanted me to have everybody take their seats. Are you going to sit in the family room?
Is everybody in there?
No, not.
No, I'll sit out here.
Okay. All right.
Joey.
Oh, Johnny Boyko.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, in the wheelchair. You can't drive with three.
Everybody tries to get together.
I'm seeing here tomorrow.
You see through here.
I'm going to try. I'm going to be visiting Johnny tomorrow.
They need to start. So we need to see people and talk to them later at the house. Okay? I need you to sit right now so I can all just come and sit down, okay? Oh!
At this time, I'm going to ask friends to have seats, and I'm going to call immediate mourners together, please. I'm going to ask the immediate mourners, those with ribbons, if you'll come forward at this time, please.
Good afternoon. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Cantor Stephen Stein. I'm a colleague of Rebecca's and a longtime close friend, and it is indeed truly an honor for me to be with you this afternoon, I should say. I'm going to begin with Psalm 121. Sheila, my Lord. Esainai el harim me'ayin yavo Azri me'im Adonai Useshamayim va'aretz Aitain lamorad lecha Aryanum shomerechai Hine lo yanum velo ishan shomer Yisrael Adonai shomerecha Adonai tzilecha yad yaminecha Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka v'yareach b'layla Adonai yishmorcha mikora yishmor nafshecha Adonai yishmor tzedecha uvoecha me'ata v'ad olam. And the psalm translates 121, I will lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? The source of my help is the Lord, creator of heaven and earth. He will not let you falter. Your guardian does not slumber. Surely the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. He is at your right hand to protect you. The Lord your keeper gives shelter. The sun will not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all harm. The Lord will preserve your soul. He will guard your going and coming from this time forth and forever. To now like to call upon my colleague Rebecca, who will chant the Adonai Ma'adam and the 23rd Psalm.
Adonai Ma'adam v'teidaehu ben enosh v'techashavehu Adam lahevel dama yamav kitzel over baboker yasit v'chalach לערב ימלל ויבש תשוב לנו שדקה ותום שוב בני אדם לו חכמו יסבילו זאת יבינו לאחריתם כי לו ומותו ייקח הכל לא ירד אחריו כבודו שמרתם אורי ישר כי אחרית לאיש שלום פודר אדוני נפש עבדיו ולא ישמו כל achosim bo. Adonai, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days like a passing shadow. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, Return, O mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai rawi lahu echsar, binoteshu yabetzeni, al mei menuchot yenachaleni, nafshi shavev, yancheni v'magle tzedek lima'an shemo. Come ki alech begates amavet, lo irada, ki atu imadi, shiftecha umishantecha, hema yanachamuni. Taroch lifanai shulchan, neged sorai, dishanta vashem en roshi, kosir vaya, ach tov v'chesed yudefuni, ko yemei chayai, v'shovati b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. Please join with me if you know this psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
From the book of Job, we learn, when a wise man dies, how can he be replaced? There is a source for silver and a place where gold is refined. Iron is taken from the earth, and from the stone copper is smelted. But where can wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? When a wise man dies, how can he be replaced? A reading that I have always found particularly meaningful and insightful at hours like this comes from our sage Ben Sira, who teaches, Fear not death, we are destined to die. We share it with all who ever lived, with all who ever will be. Bewail the dead, hide not your grief, do not restrain your mourning. But remember that continuing sorrow is worse than death. When the dead are at rest, let their memory rest, and be consoled when the soul departs. Death is better than a life of pain, and eternal rest than constant sickness. Seek not to understand what is too difficult for you. Search not for what is hidden from you. Be not overoccupied with what is beyond you, for you have been shown more than you can understand. As a drop of water in the sea, as a grain of sand on the shore are man's few days in eternity. The good things in life last for limited days, but a good name endures forever. O God, our Father, you redeem our souls from the grave. You are the rock of our salvation. Forsake us not in days of trouble, in distress and desolation. Help us to endure, O Lord, for we have placed our hope in you. O merciful Father, strengthen those who mourn the loss of Dr. Marvin Miller. Help them to look beyond this moment. Help them to realize that death cannot destroy the bonds of your everlasting love. Sustain them with the knowledge of our faith that you will not abandon our souls to the grave, that you will not allow your faithful to suffer oblivion, for you, O Lord, have taught us the way of life. Through you, our refuge, we gain eternity, and let us say, Amen. When I first received news of Dr. Miller's passing late yesterday morning, what first went through my mind was the added pain of losing a father and, of course, a beloved spouse on Father's Day. Among the many thoughts going through my mind was I focused on the family, and I had to imagine thinking about, as they recalled the years of past Father's Days, the wonderful memories that were celebrated over so many years in good health, contrasted with the sadness of the day. Becky reminded me of a dinner that she, Dr. Miller, my late wife Abby, and I enjoyed together following a recital given by my son, in which Becky sang 3 Hebrew art songs that Scott had composed. As soon as she mentioned the evening, it quickly came back to mind. That was 15 years ago. I recall being extremely impressed by Dr. Miller, a true gentleman, and I remember the pride with which he spoke about his entire family. To me, being a physician is the most noble of professions. As clergy, Rebecca and I strive and hope to make a difference, a positive difference in the lives of others. But often we don't know if we've succeeded. Physicians are able to firsthand see how they have improved the lives of their patients through the ability to diagnose illnesses and prescribe treatments. And yet there is also the immense emotional component of their vocation, one with which doctors wrestle constantly when informing patients that they have been stricken with an illness for which there is yet no cure. Though I only met Dr. Miller once, I feel confident in saying that he had to have been a physician who shared such news with his patients with the utmost compassion. Dr. Miller served in the Navy and spent the last years of his career caring for patients at the local VA hospital. In fact, he was practicing medicine until close to the age of 80, long after most have retired. What an admirable way to devote the final years of his career, caring for those who had selflessly put their lives on the line to protect the rest of us. I also have a soft spot in my heart for the VA, as my daughter-in-law is employed as an administrator and music therapist for the VA in New York City. Renata, my heart goes out to you, as I too have experienced the loss of a spouse, someone who I've loved, who we have loved, shared decades, and raised a family. To Rebecca, Cynthia, Valerie, Victor, and Lydia, to your spouses and children, I offer my heartfelt condolences as well. I'd like to now call on Rebecca to share reflections and words of tribute for her father on behalf of the family, and she will be followed by grandchildren Amnon and Julia.
Thank you so much, Steve. I was just reflecting on how I helped you bury your beloved Abby not too long ago, and now you, in turn, are helping me, and thinking we have to stop meeting like this. Yeah. Thank you, family and friends, for being here with us to help put my father, Marvin, to rest. Today, the heavens are crying along with us. My father would have said, "This is Cleveland. If you don't like the weather, just wait a minute." My dad, Marvin, was the archetype of a family man. He was devoted, loyal, steadfast, and constant. He was also the weirdest guy I've ever known. He was unique. He was utterly and unremittingly himself. He could be pushed and prodded, Mom. But ultimately, he had his own way of doing things. He was also the most loving person I've ever known. He had the capacity for complete, unconditional love, that magic elixir we all look for in life, and we Miller kids and grandkids had the mother load, or father load in this case. He once confessed to me that he was surprised to discover that he loved his grandkids as if they were his own children. My children had the privilege of growing up in Cleveland with my parents, and they certainly felt that love, and I know those of you who are grandparents can probably relate. Marvin grew up in something very close to an American translation of the shtetl. His first language was Yiddish, which the family spoke with his grandmother who lived upstairs. His grandmother adored him, as did his mother, who was overprotective to the extent that he never went to summer camp or had swimming lessons because it was too dangerous, something he lamented every time he dog paddled around us swimmers. He grew up in a kosher household, spoiled by his mother's Jewish cooking, and supported by his Polish-born father, who had a barbershop on Mayfield Road and prayed at the local synagogue every morning. His father, my grandfather, came to this country with his own father, my great-grandfather, in 1914 at the age of 8. He helped his carpenter father earn the money to bring their mother and new baby brother over. As you can surmise by the date, this was not to happen until after the Great War. My father used to take us regularly to visit this grandfather, the carpenter, our great-grandfather, when we older Miller kids were very young, until his passing. I don't remember the date, but my father would have known because he remembered every date of everything that ever happened in our family. My father used to tell the story of sitting in the back seat of his father's Buick and the door next to him swinging open and feeling himself sucked out. Of course, there were no seat belts in those days. Without taking his eyes off the road, my grandfather reached back and pulled my father back into the car by his collar. Neither of Marvin's parents went beyond the 8th grade. Yet he graduated from Glenville High School. He went on to college as a chemistry major at Case Western Reserve, and then to medical school at the Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine. This is truly the American immigrant dream story. My father had a deep, unfathomable, and mysterious intelligence. He never read, yet he knew everything. He frequently regaled us with trivia and quizzed us on all sorts of factoids about presidents and baseball. He was an amazing diagnostician. You could call him and tell him your symptoms, and he always told you what would later be positively confirmed by tests, as all of us and even several of my friends know personally. His entire childhood, he had mourned being an only child, and he rejoiced when his mother became pregnant at a late age. When my father was 16, a baby sister, Judy, was born. We are fairly certain through the lens of today's knowledge that Judy was severely autistic. And like most autistic children, her development proceeded normally up until a certain point. My father recalls her being extremely verbal, speaking like a parrot, until she began regressing. Her constant teeth grinding and rhythmic rocking motions made the family realize that something was unusual. My distraught grandparents, who believed her regression was a result of dropping her on her head, brought her to the Cleveland Clinic and were told there was nothing that could be done. So they settled into a life of seclusion with their hidden problem. My siblings, father, and I were the only ones who went to their house, which we did every Friday night for Shabbos dinner and every Pesach for Seder, and, of course, for my grandmother's heavenly cooking. At the end of each meal, my grandmother would take the leftover matzo ball soup chicken, tear it into strips, and make 2 big chicken sandwiches drowned in mayo on soft challah, and then a slice of her magic parve chocolate cake, which I have been trying unsuccessfully to replicate for my dad for the past 25 years. And that would be his lunch for his hospital rounds the next day. Sometimes my sisters Cynthia and Valerie and I would play in the hospital lounge during rounds. I remember they had a blackboard, and it was thrilling to be able to write on it. And he would share that cake with us. These were different times when a doctor could leave his kids to play in a hospital. My father would go over to his parents' house whenever they needed to help with Judy. And when they passed on, he became her legal guardian. My mother was extremely helpful in managing this responsibility, and they found an excellent placement for her through Jewish Family Services until her passing in 2013, for which we are eternally grateful. My father cried his heart out when she died. He was an excellent tennis player and marathon runner. I see the wife of his former tennis partner is here, Erica. Seemingly graced with natural strength and athleticism in his 6-foot-plus frame, his parents were tiny people. Later in life, he followed my mother into the Cleveland Hiking Club, where they hiked 3, 5, or 10 miles a day. He had a seemingly bottomless vocabulary. I remember when I was studying for the SATs, he was a walking dictionary. He also had a way with words and could be called upon to write poems for special occasions that were charming and very good. He was an oral learner, and he kept up with his professional literature through a monthly series of medical audio tapes that he listened to religiously in the car as he drove back and forth to his private practice in Seven Hills. I remember my mother helping him furnish and set up that practice when I was a very small child, working her administrative magic, finding the furnishings, calling potential patients from the practice they'd bought, while raising a passel of children. I also sometimes had the job of filing patient records as an older child. Again, different times. He had no head for business. My mother was his manager. He had talent and brains, and we all think good looks. But she wrote his resumes and pointed him in all the right directions. And then he did his part, working tirelessly with total concentration and absolute integrity. She was instrumental in setting up that first practice, then selling it, then moving him to the Navy, where he retired as a captain, the highest rank before admiral. He loved this country, and he loved democracy passionately. After that, he went on to work for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and finally in his 70s for the VA, where he treated his fellow vets. He worked as a physician until the age of 79. His patients loved him. In private practice, I remember baked goods and home crafts and even a beautiful black cat coming home as gifts. My mother would get calls from patients telling her what a wonderful husband she has. His nurses, once they decoded his always worried visage and his cursing under pressure, also adored him. My parents were a power team. He was a big worrier. You might even call him neurotic. For the last 20 years or so, I regularly got phone calls asking if I'd heard from my mother if she'd been out for more than 2 hours, escalating into more and more panic with each passing moment. During their long-time membership in the Cleveland Hiking Club, the rest of the club frequently had to circle back to my mother to tell her that my father was looking for her. I never got off a plane without a call or a text from him asking if I'd arrived safely, or if it was my kids who were traveling, if they had arrived safely. My father loved driving. He drove us everywhere, to every music lesson, to Hebrew school, all of our after-school activities. Family vacations were always by car, and he was the road warrior, driving a station wagon loaded with my parents, 5 kids, and my mother's parents to Florida, Boston, and even Montreal. As I raised my own kids and Irad needed to travel constantly while he was building his company, he frequently stepped in to help me with the driving, doing the daily swim team pickup more often than not. One of his chief regrets this past year through his decline was not driving, and even last week he reminded me that I had to take him to renew his driver's license in August. He also loved writing us emails. He wrote to all of us every day. And during the last years of difficult politics in this country, his emails were all in caps with many exclamation points. He was in perpetual outrage and was offended to the core over actions, positions, and power that violated his deeply ingrained sense of decency. He and my mother devoted themselves to our education and enrichment, and he supported us in all our endeavors through his hard work. At summer camp, I received a daily postcard, daily, from him in his doctor's scrawl, which it seemed I alone could always decipher. Usually it was about the weather, even if I was just at Camp Wise a few miles away. 5 kids through college and graduate schools, he never saw us as off the payroll. When Irad and I moved back to Cleveland in 2001 and we were worried about buying a house with Irad's then employer in crisis, my father, who had just done one of his many retirements, the first of many, reasoned matter-of-factly that if Irad lost his job, which he did, he himself could always go back to work to cover our mortgage, so we should just go ahead. He had a wonderful ability to play. He would chase us around as young children, saying, "I kiss you on the head." My kids loved getting him to dance with them or do ridiculous, funny walks. He was completely uninhibited. When my husband Erod met him, he said he'd never before met an accomplished adult who still had all the energy of a child. And he loved his sweets. He always had big Hershey's, giant chocolate bars, bags of Kisses, and jelly beans. He kept them in his drawers at work, as all the nurses knew, and he ate them at night watching TV. He'd always joke he'd like some coffee with his cream and sugar, and was always amazed when I served him tea with enough sugar. 2.5 tablespoons was my secret formula. He lived on junk food and sweets, and it never seemed to impact his health. He did make it to almost 87 with no blood sugar issues. My father was a very emotional man. He lived for his 5 kids, his wife, and his 14 grandchildren. He loved to brag about us to anyone who would listen, often to our extreme embarrassment. He was so proud of his 5 accomplished children and their beautiful families. At his 80th birthday, overcome with emotion for once and at a loss for words, he was for once at a loss for words. He felt that none of us were criminals or drug addicts. He also had uncanny insight into who we all are as people. Often in his own world, seemingly disconnected or lost in his worried state, he nevertheless continuously amazed us with his perceptiveness about other people. He got us and we got him, and he was always, always, always there for us when it counted. He loved my mother unstintingly and with complete devotion. He was crazy about her, even when she was angry with him, which was frequently because, he could be frustrating. It was especially touching to see through these last difficult months how tender and caring she was with him, even while dealing with her own health issues. She's the one who fattened him up for a valve replacement earlier this month. And when he first went into the hospital with that final pneumonia and was still with it, she would ask him at the end of each visit if he wanted a kiss, and he would always nod happily like a kid and lean forward as she maneuvered herself to lean over the bed to give him that kiss. Early in 2006, he was diagnosed with CLL, chronic lymphocytic leukemia. He waited until after my son Amnon's bar mitzvah to tell me so as not to ruin the event for me. He cried as he told me, not for himself, he explained, but because he said he knew how I felt about him. He never really suffered the effects of CLL until his first chemo a couple of years ago. Again, he'd know the date, which he withstood quite easily. At the outset of COVID-19 in the spring of 2020, my mother was already in assisted living, and my father remained in their condo and began walking 2 miles a day with me and my family. That was up until the end of last summer. We tried to protect him from COVID by doing all his errands and shopping. But that fall, he joined my mother in assisted living, and they both caught COVID as it rampaged through the staff and patients of the facility. My mother had a runny nose, but my father lost everything. Since then, he has had repeated hospitalizations and rehabs as infection after infection ravaged his body and his mind. He worked hard to put on weight and strength to qualify for that valve replacement that he desperately needed, and on June 1st he got it. He had a few days of feeling the effects of that successful procedure, and once again we were all hopeful for him when pneumonia set in. That was the final battle in a long series of skirmishes set off by COVID-19, and the one he ultimately lost. But really, he had been losing bits and pieces of himself along the way. I think he kept fighting because he knew how much we wanted to continue to be with him. His constant goal, whatever hospital room or rehab he was in, was to get out so he could get back to living with Mom. I want to share the last paragraph of his eulogy for his mother. Time does not heal the wounds of great losses, but makes them more bearable. You live on in our thoughts and dreams. It's been a privilege to share some grains in the sands of time with you. I hope that we will meet again in the afterlife. Dad, we now pass it on to you. I'm glad he knew how I and all of us felt about him. He was exuberant, wacky, neurotic, loving, smart, and the best dad in the world. His official time of death was 12:10 a.m. on Father's Day. How appropriate that he should exit on that day that summarizes best what his life was all about. Our hearts are broken, and the world is not the same without him. Zichrono livracha.
For those of you who do not know me, I am Amnon, Marvin Miller's first grandson. I'd like to share a few words. And I'm sure our great big family will relate. Grandpa, we love you. I love being able to call you Grandpa. As I know you loved being called by that name. From my earliest memories, and from what I've heard through our loving family, you became a grandpa as naturally as you became a dad for your kids. And I think memories is a key word here. If you are up there worrying, in that grandpa way that you do, about how we remember you, please rest easy. We acknowledge and sympathize with the struggles you endured. But when I say Grandpa, all I can think about is your charming energy and the unfathomable warmth of your love. The grin, always ready to spring from the corners of your mouth. I hear the joy in your voice. When you see your grandkids, the way you exclaim our names, which I imagine would be in all capital letters, like your email rants. Your funny dances, and the wisp of hair in your head that would dance around as well. I can't describe the comfort we feel with you, the memories of you. You gave and gave with your endless devotion, and you got everything you could ever want in return. I'm amazed at how effortless it was for you. You are a beacon of everything that makes for a fulfilling life, and you knew that you had one. It's hard to imagine a world without you here. But I accept a world where you have a place in the memories of many, many people. It is my pleasure to have the rest of my life to think about you. On my own, and with those you know, to feel your warmth again. Thank you, and I love you so much.
Growing up, my family referred to Grandpa as Grandpa Regular. This was our way of distinguishing him from my paternal grandfather, who happens to have a similar first name. In retrospect, I think regular was a bit of a misnomer for Marvin, because there really was nothing regular about him. In fact, I would say he had a great many quirks and idiosyncrasies, which I think qualified him as far more special than regular. One of Grandpa's special quirks was that his sharp mind held a lot of information, but really a lot of information about a very specific set of topics. First and foremost, the presidents. He'd cheerily spring his presidential trivia quizzes on anyone who would listen at any moment or any time of any day. And yes, I do mean right in the middle of any unrelated conversation. His love for politics didn't stop at political history, but also encompassed current events. I was lucky to be part of a select group who received Grandpa's bi-weekly, all-caps lock political emails, or should I say tirades. Grandpa also knew a lot about cars, not all cars really, just the specific makes and models he drove over the years, which he studied very carefully. I had the good fortune of driving a Toyota Prius at the same time Grandpa did, so I quickly became well educated on all the differences between the 2009 and 2010 models. And surprisingly, there were many. Grandpa was a lifelong physician, and as such, he always seemed to take pleasure in telling me in precise, scientific detail about his many medical procedures. Some might hear his professional and matter-of-fact way of discussing his own life-altering procedures and call him emotionless. But I think Grandpa was actually pretty good at expressing and discussing emotions. I remember when I was in college and trying to decide whether to go to medical school or to pursue the arts. I had been struggling in my science classes and was leaning towards a more creative field, but I was hesitant to give up on medicine, especially coming from a family full of proud doctors. With no judgment in his voice, Grandpa told me that I should pursue what I loved and what made me happy. He was definitely always looking out for other people, whether it be his 5 children, his 14 grandchildren, the love of his life, Renate, as he called her, or the other hikers on the trail with him, who he blessed with a very loud and aggressive courtesy warning anytime a runner was approaching from behind. In all seriousness, the Miller clan has been a steadfast and essential part of my childhood, adolescence, and now young adulthood, and it will never be the same without Grandpa. I was so lucky to have him for 24 years of my life. He's been there for all of my major milestones to date, my bat mitzvah, my high school graduation, and my college graduation, and I'm so grateful. Let's all drink some coffee with our cream and sugar today in his honor.
What truly wonderful and beautiful tributes to a remarkable man. I ask that you rise for the chanting of the memorial prayer, the El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim Shochain Ba'merobim Hamitzay Menuchani Chunah Tachat Kanefei HaShekhinah B'malot Kedoshim U'Teharim K'Zohar Rakiyah Mazirim Anishmat Moines Bereb Feifel Miriam Shalach Le'olamo Began Eidan Taimen Chato Anna Balarachamim Hastirehu Besedek Nafecha Le'olamim Utzra Misra Chaim Anishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato V'yanuach Mishalom Mishkavo V'nomaer Amen. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and among the pure, to the soul of Moines Bereb Feifel Miriam, Dr. Marvin Miller, who is gone to his eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all of the worthy and righteous deeds that he performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. The Lord is his portion. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated.
Folks, the family asked me to announce before we head to Lakeview Cemetery that anyone coming to visit the family throughout the receiving period, throughout the Shiva period, those that need to have special parking needs, they should park in the driveway, right? Yes. So if you have special needs, park in the driveway. Otherwise, if not, you're asked to either park in Legacy Village and come across that way, or on Community Drive.
Right, and Tuesday there will be a valet.
And Tuesday there will be a valet for folks to help out. At this time, I'd like to ask those acting as pallbearers, please. Pallbearers, if you will come forward. And you're going to step down the center aisle with Mr. Goldfarb.
Pallbearers, if you'll come with me, please.
Would everyone kindly rise and remain in place for a moment, please? We're all going to follow right behind. Stand and follow right behind, please. Those family members, grandchildren. As I said, Lakeview Cemetery is the point and place of burial. Those going with the family to the burial portion of the service, please step directly to your cars, start your cars and turn on your headlights. You can exit to the rear of the chapel or the front of the chapel at this time, please.